Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network.
Hello, this is Nick Pope, and you're listening to the Paranormal UK radio network, the UK's biggest paranormal network. And this is Paranormal Dimensions with David Young.
Hello, welcome to the show. Thank you, Nick. Right, hopefully we've got another good show for you today. I've got a fantastic author for you. His name's Paul Sinclair. He's had two really good selling books out, Truth Proof, and there's another one just come out, Truth Proof 3. And I'll just be inviting him on in just a moment. But before I do that, I'll just do my usual call-outs for people. We've got Ken Jenkins, New York City, New York, USA. Ellie Richardson, Portsmouth, UK. And Bill Rook, York, UK. Now, hopefully, I'll be having Bill Rook on at some point, and we may even mention Bill during this show, because I think he has experiences with light beings and things such as that Paul talks about. Anyway, I think the best thing to do is introduce Paul right now. Hello, Paul. Are you there?
Hello there, David. Yeah, I'm here, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak on show today. Very good. And interesting, I need to say thank you to Nick Pope, because he wrote me a few words for the third book. So if he gets to hear this, thank you, Nick. Another one.
Well, hopefully he will. I think he wrote on your second one as well, didn't he, on the back?
Yeah, he has done, yeah. He's been really kind.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now, yeah. He said, a fascinating and disturbing collection of accounts, Nick Pope.
Yes. So, it's quite nice when such a notable authors, such as Whitley Strieber and other people, take an interest, and Derek Tyler. I don't know if you've ever had Derek on the show. If you haven't,
not yet, but it's a name in the frame.
Yeah, fabulous guest he would make. And they sort of, I wouldn't say credit your work, but they've read it and think, yeah, that's worth giving a thumbs up, and I thank those people. But as regards today, David, you just ask me whatever you want, and we'll just go whatever direction you want to take it.
Yeah, well, I'll just mention your first two books. You got Truth Proof. It says The Truth That Leaves No Proof was your first book, wasn't it? It came out a couple of years ago, didn't it? I think.
Yeah, 2016, and then we've got Truth Proof 2, Beyond the Thinking Mind, and then sounds a bit simplistic, isn't it? Truth Proof 3, Bringing Down the Light, and there will be a Truth Proof 4, listeners, I assure you.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, I've got to be honest, Paul, I haven't got your third one yet, but I'm going to get it, all right? And I'll expect you to scribble on it for me, so.
Will do. It's only scribble if I've done it, you know.
Anyway, no, I mean, I don't know where you want to take it, Paul. I mean, perhaps you'd like to tell us how you first got into ufology, if you will. You used to run a website, didn't you? You still do?
No, I haven't got the website. Well, there's a website, if you can call it that. I don't do myself any favours, because I'm not that brilliant with social media. So there's a website which is truthproof.webs.com. But before that, whilst I was working, I think from about 2002 to 2013, I had a website called ILF UFO, meaning the ILF was Intelligent Light Forms, which is basically what I believe we've been viewing up on the East Yorkshire wolds, around East and North Yorkshire. The wolds are the large expanses of land, open land and farmland, and with, intermittent, the sparse woodland in between them, mainly sheep grazing, but you've got these strange spheres of light that will just suddenly appear and punch into multiples of 3s, 4s and 5s. And they're getting them over the sea as well. And no doubt we're dealing with the same phenomena. But what I've found, David, and I'm no expert on this. I'm same as everybody who's listening to this and everybody who goes to the conferences. I'm searching for answers. But repeat areas are showing time and time again, and I'm sort of naming them the multi-phenomena areas. And so MFAs. I realise I've said phenomena as it with an F, but I'm not really bothered about that. And what it seems, though, David, is that these locations don't just throw up UFO sightings, and I think, to sort of coin a phrase, a UFO investigator or researcher, I think we should throw net a lot wider and include everything. I think we're all missing a trick. The people who are into the ghost aspect of it and the poltergeist. But because I think ultimately it's all linked.
Yeah,
I don't
absolutely agree with you, Paul. I mean, I've said that on several shows. I don't know if you've heard any previous shows, but that's my idea. Well, not my idea. That's the way I think as well. I think a few years ago I couldn't see any links in it, but from what I've been hearing and sort of studying and reading about over the last sort of 10 years or so, I really do agree with you. I think it's all linked. It's all connected somehow.
Yeah, I mean, just because we don't understand it doesn't mean that it's not happening, and it can't happen. I mean, there's too many people entrenched in their box of research, shall we say, and I think I don't think it's a mistake. I mean, if you jump to, thousands of miles to the other side of the world and looked at Skinwalker, and you'll see that every type of phenomena is manifesting there, from structured craft reported, over the years, to animal mutilation, to cryptids, to big cats. So to me, it would be stupid to think that there isn't maybe location is the key. That's what that's what I say in the first book and the second book. Location is key, because these things do seem to be appearing in and around the same locations constantly, and it'd be interesting if we could get these multi-phenomena areas. We know they're established in other parts of the world, but if we could get researchers in other parts of the world to report when the alien big cats are being seen, for instance, because we get that around East and North Yorkshire, David, and it'd be interesting if we could find out, get some networking going to find out if in the other active areas the cats are being seen there as well, and for instance, or if the UFOs are being seen, the light forms, for want of a better word, these spheres of light that we know Earth lights exist. I mean, that can't be denied, but I feel that the lights that we're observing over the sea, off Bempton and Flamborough, there's an awareness to them, and I've spoke to too many trawlermen, rock anglers, seen them myself, not to think that there's more to these things than just a random, the movement of the earth,
Sure.
thousands and thousands of feet below the surface. These things seem to have the ability to switch on, punch into a multiple of 4, 5, switch off and appear in a different part of the sky instantly, and they're in formation, they're in lines that are equally spaced. There's no randomness to them most of the time. What they're about, I don't know. I mean, whether there's anything. Interestingly, in the next book, because like I said, I'm well on with the next one. I have an incredible report from a contracts manager for the MOD, and I'm going to be using his full name because he's allowed me to do this. But we've moved out of East and North Yorkshire, and I'm sorry, listeners, if I'm rambling a little bit, but that's a story. But it was given it as part of his job on this contract from 2011, I believe it was. It was given a house to rent overlooking the sea. This is in Cornwall. And he contacted me to say he'd seen the spheres of light that he'd read about in the Truth Proof books. And that's what prompted him to contact me. We've had lots of conversations, but he got binoculars, high-powered binoculars on these lights. And there were plenty of news coverage at the time. People had seen them. But he claims that inside the light, he could see gold pyramids. Which is, I just find it interesting. I mean, I've never observed anything like that inside them, but I mean, it's an evening sighting. It's not quite dark. As I say, and this guy's given me full permission to use his name in the book, which I will be doing. And the story's pretty terrifying, to be honest with you, because he had the most terrifying experience after the night he saw these objects, these spheres of light over the sea, and he believes that was to stop him talking about them. But I don't know if I can talk about what happened to him on radio. I am going to write about it, but as I say, I've just gone off on a tangent there, David. You know, we in the area that we're in eastern North Yorkshire, there's what I'm looking into at Bempton and Flamborough and a bit further up the coast, Speeton and Ravenscar and Filey. It's not new. This stuff goes back decades. It probably goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. You know,
I've heard quite a few of the stories about them. I mean, especially in your books as well. You do highlight a lot of the historical incidents, don't you?
Well, I think folklore was what we once termed as science before science codified it and tried to bring it into some kind of unity and fit it into boxes that we could understand. We're all folklore, David. We're all sort of living folklore. And I think there's, just because it's not the written word and people say, oh, stories get embellished. Well, of course they do, yeah. But if the same stories are coming out today that were coming out hundreds of years ago, then there has to be some substance to them. If we've got people still reporting seeing an upright dog-like creature around the areas of Flixton, like it's been reported for hundreds of years, then you think to yourself, hang on a minute, either all these people are liars, or there's an element of truth in this. And I've said it many times, David, on radio shows, and I think I said it in the books as well. I don't actually believe that there's anything that could transform from a man to a beast. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that there isn't some truth to these stories, because there's too many people talking about it and coming out with these things. I mean, just recently, as early as February the 7th of this year, I don't know whether you looked at the Bempton Phenomena, the documentary that me and Chris Turner did.
Not yet. No, I'm looking forward to.
Well, obviously you know that Chris did Elusive about the British cryptids, the dogman type creatures, or I'm not really fond of the word dogman, although we're only playing with words, aren't we?
I was actually going to ask you about this, but you might as well carry on and tell us about it now.
Well, I mean, I think werewolf obviously conjures up images from movies and underworld. People associate it with silver bullets. I mean, it's hard to, I don't want to invent a new word for it, but I think we've got to stay with werewolf. I just wish people would maybe get away from idea that there's some kind of transformation or from a man or a woman to a beast, because I believe there's something to it. I think the American Indians have probably got the best idea, with the skinwalkers believing this is a creature that can live between worlds. And and that's its ability to slip between our world and its own,
interdimensional creature. Yeah.
And that's what I'm willing to be convinced otherwise, and I'm willing to be shown otherwise. I'd love to, but at the moment that's where I'm leaning, because I believe it exists. For this latest documentary, Bringing Down the Light, we've spoke to a guy who lives in Caton, and he was with his wife, and he claims that this creature literally, he saw it in his peripheral vision, jumped to the front of a garden just on the edge of the Flixton and Caton Cars. That's the area of wetland that used to be once Lake Flixton in Paleolithic times. That's 11,000 years ago. So it's a pretty remote area, and there's a row of bungalows along the edge of the cars. From one leap, this thing leapt into the middle of the road, and another leap, and it were over onto the cars. And he described this wiry, thin creature that were far too long. Everything went out of proportion with it. Its legs operated like a canine's legs, but he didn't describe it as having something like a wolf's head or anything. And he's adamant about what he saw, and it's so much so, and he's no mug, this fella. I mean, I think he's highly qualified. Well, I know he is. And he's gone on camera. You know, you get some people, David, and they're telling you the truth, as you know. We've all come across them. That's why we get people in the audiences at conferences, myself included, where they're coming to listen to an experience, because many of them have got fabulous experiences of their own, probably better than mine, better than yours, but they just don't want to talk about it. But so back to my point, this guy's willing to go on camera with his name and state what he's seen, and many people won't do that. We've got some on the film that we've blurred the faces out. We've got a guy who claims he worked for the MOD at Bempton after it shut, and me and Chris have interviewed him for over an hour, and I've spoken to him previously because I've set the interview up, and this guy claims that his job was, first of all, he'd got some special abilities, and I'm not talking he could teleport or anything silly like that, but I'm not. It'll be in the documentary. But what I'm saying is, he was employed after the base closed to spend time around the base, trying to look for unexplained phenomena, which he never found. He never found nothing. He's quite open about that. He's quite truthful about the fact that he never found anything, but as his role working for the MOD, or Air Force actually, that was his job. And he comes out with some really interesting things. He's an interesting guy, let's put it that road, and nobody will have ever heard this man speak before, but when you do hear him speak, you'll realise how interesting he is.
Yeah, no, it sounds fascinating, yeah.
It is. I mean, this guy claims that the MOD or the powers that be already know that there's different species of, I'm reluctant to call them alien because I don't know where they come from. But they know at least that there was 3 different species manifesting or appearing around that area, and he didn't even get told the names of these things. He just got told 1, 2, and 3, and he claimed that they were coming through portals in the area. Now, once again, part of the job of doing this documentary is to get other people's stories. So I'm not saying I believe everything that somebody's told me, hook, line and sinker. Just like we've just been talking about the accounts of the Flixton werewolf. All I do is, me and Andy Ramsden, I don't know if you know Andy, yeah. David, I think you do, yeah?
Yeah.
We've seen something highly unusual at Bempton back in, I'm not sure if it was 2016 or 2017, that came from the edge of the cliff, and it were on all fours, and it ran and it cleared a 3-bar fence and went up the field. And when we put a light on up the field, Andy became very scared that this, whatever it was, a big
I think I've heard about this, but yeah. It is in your book, isn't it? I think I've read it. Yeah,
that's correct. It blinked and looked away and sort of dipped its head down, and it weren't frightened of us, which draws. I mean, people might be thinking, well, these guys have seen a fox or a badger. Let me tell you, I've spent years up here around foxes and badgers. We've been trying to find out what's slaughtering the livestock up at Bempton, which stopped early this year because there's no longer livestock up there. They've done with it. They can't suffer any more losses. But because whatever was killing the livestock, and I realise, listeners, I'm jumping about all over the place here. I think I've just took David by surprise, listeners, today, because
I usually get taken by surprise, it's all right.
No, we didn't plan this. It's my fault entirely. But whatever's killing the livestock is not really that interested in eating it. It wants to remove all the skin from the faces, remove their eyes, and take the.
So, do you reckon there's any connections with the old? The horse mutilations and cattle mutilations, but from years ago, like which Melton Howell investigated. Do you think Richard D. Hall investigated a lot of it as well?
They possibly could be. We still haven't established not even a clue what's doing it, because whatever is doing it, in my opinion, is marine based as well, because when it got at its peak, David, and all the pictures are in the new book. And I'll say all, there's quite a lot of pictures that are quite graphic in the new book, depicting what I've said. I'm not just saying these things without the evidence, because we did that on the Bempton phenomena, and due to YouTube, we didn't show the images. That was the reason. But people believe that we were just talking hot air. Well, all the images are in the book, and all the images will be in bringing down the light. What we were finding around the edges of the cliffs and on the shoreline very close were harbour porpoise, the little dolphin type mammals, probably about 4 foot long, but interesting injury to them. They'd got huge holes through their jaws, And we're talking 3 to 4 inch round holes, sort of smashed through the jaws, and no other signs of injury. And interestingly, with the sheep, usually the throat had been torn out, but nothing had been eaten, and there was no blood. We were finding roe deer carcasses with heads removed, badgers with heads removed, but not just heads removed, skinned around the waist as though they've got the shirt off. There's no easier way of saying it than that. Macabre, really, and when you consider that a roe deer is probably the fastest thing in UK and probably only dog to catch, it would be a greyhound. Well, I'm sorry for sounding, if I'm a bit too macabre here, David, you stop me.
No, okay.
If a dog's predated on a sheep or a deer, you're going to find puncture wounds. You're going to find bite marks all over the animal. They're not very selective. They're not like a big cat which is calculated and knows what part of the animal to grab hold of.
I know what you mean. They actually they'll get hold of them by the neck or wherever they can get hold of them, can't they? I know.
That's correct.
I've actually had whippets in the past, so I know how they go after rabbits and things, and they just get hold of them wherever they can get hold of them.
But what you've got here are animals that, for want of a better word, have just been look like they've been killed instantly, and the eyes look like they've been sucked out with a hoover. There's no trauma, and the ears cut off, very, very clean cut. So what's doing it, I don't know, because some people have suggested is there a human element to it, because as people know, I've probably in the past talked about the satanic cult that once operated up at RAF Bempton, and is it something to do with them? Well, personally, I don't think so, because the locations where these animals are being found is very remote, and to get there you'd have to use torches and that, and they would be seen by the farmers. When I'm talking about this amount of sheep, people have said to me, "Are police involved?" Or I've heard seen comments, "Well, police would be involved." Yeah, police are involved. They haven't got a clue what it is. They've sat up there with night scopes and found one dead in the same field where they've had night scopes. The police have not got a clue. I don't know what's doing it. I wish I did. But whatever it is, it's land-based, it's marine-based, and it's capable of hitting these things. The 70, 80 kilo ewes is just devastating them. And there's lambs in field as well. It's not really touching lambs. It seems to be the adult ewes. But as I say, they've gone now. There's none in the fields now. And thank God, because it can't be, well, it's a sudden death, but it's still tragic.
Also, it's actually like a farmer's money as well, isn't it? That's being lost by it, if he's losing his stock. Every
time one's hit is and you don't know the area, David, but I did a bit of digging, and I rang livestock auction houses and different places around the area. And it turns out that probably about 16 to 18 miles up the coast as the crow flies at Ravenscar, a similar thing was happening there. All on the coast, though. This is on the edge of the sea, just like these locations. And then if you went about 24 miles down the coast towards Hull, it was happening there at a place just towards the coast off Sproatley. So we weren't isolated, we weren't unique, but it's the nature of the injuries that's unique. And I don't really understand it. There's no accounting for it. I became alerted to it on, I think it was New Year's Day. It was New Year's Day 2018, because the police officers had been to see a guy who lives in the Danes Dyke, a vagrant. He's lived there for 11 years. And they wanted to know if he'd seen any highly unusual animals whilst living in this, in this woodland. And they told him, we took the tramp some food actually, and that's why I got to know about the story. And they told him that in the weeks previous, animals had been killed at Bempton. But when I found out about it, it turns out it had been going on all year. But they're quite secular, and they don't really share much information with each other, so you don't know what other farms it's happening to. It's very difficult to, just like all close-knit communities, just like in South Yorkshire and other places where there's mining communities, they keep themselves to themselves, and the farming stock are no different, and the trawlermen are no different. Difficult to get information.
Did much of that get in the newspapers, or was there sort of a cover-up going on, do you think?
I don't know whether I'd call it a cover-up, but there's been nothing in the newspapers. And interestingly enough, they know all about it. But there's been, I mean, the newspaper a few months ago, the Bridlington Echo, contacted me because there was a big cat scene. I can't remember the exact date. It'll probably be 3 months ago now. There's been a big black cat scene by numerous people at Buckton. And we're talking Labrador-sized cat, which is interesting because, as we've said before, as I've said, location is key. And where's it been seen before? At Buckton over the years. You know, going back 10, 20, 30 years, people have reported seeing a cat around that time. I think it was March time at Buckton. So they asked me, and then they did a little article and put a picture of me in, and I didn't know they were doing this. But I know for a fact anyway that this guy knows all about the sheep. But they've not ran it in papers or anything, but I don't know. I mean, at the moment,
on local TV, nothing like on the local TV at all.
Nothing at all, because they
I mean, it's quite a big local incident to be happening, isn't it? With all, you know, with animals being mutilated like that.
When I found out about it, when the farmer first realised anything was wrong, because when I found out on New Year's Day, I managed to trace the farmer, and I went to speak to him, and I asked him if he'd let me look into it for him, and I said nothing. That's why I've not drawn no conclusions, David. I'm not one of these people that's going to turn around and go, oh, this has got to be alien related, or this is some kind of land-based unknown predator. It's all up in the air. I really don't know what's responsible for it. But what is interesting is that these lights are seen when a lot of the incidents take place. So that can't be denied. Even jumping from the sheep for a moment, even going back to 1970 and the crash of Lightning XS894 on September the 8th, 1970. What were XS894 allegedly doing? It were pursuing a light and vanished from radar 5 miles off Bempton. You know, I mean, the actual written work from other people might say it vanished from radar 20 miles off Bempton, but it didn't. I've got the lifeboat logs. I know where it disappeared from. We're only splitting hairs here, but what I'm saying is it was allegedly pursuing a light, and I think there's a lot of information I'd jump off fence with XS894 and say I believe it's UFO related. But jumping back to the sheep and what's been happening, I told him, I'm not going to form any conclusions, just let me try and find out what's happening. And I spent best part of 18 months going up to those fields in between 4 and 5 a.m. And finding the carcasses, but never finding the culprit, never finding any evidence to say it were human activity or paranormal activity, if we want to just put that into some kind of big bowl and shake it up, because I don't know what. But interestingly, after we did the Bempton phenomena, David, I don't normally look at comments, or I look at the comments, but I don't normally reply to them, because if you start replying to them, if there's anything negative, you're just feeding whoever you're feeding them, and I'm not into that.
True,
you know.
Yeah.
So I don't really get involved. But this guy had told me, he'd put in comments, he says, these blokes aren't lying. I've seen something at Bempton. And I think he said I've seen that were like from a nightmare. I don't know, he wrote a fair bit, and there were just an error in this chap's message. And so I messaged him. I said, I'd love to hear what you've seen. So it turns out that he'd actually written about it somewhere, and I found it on February the 7th, the day he came back. And they'd gone up to Bempton to do some wild camping. They're ex-military. They wouldn't be in military now. They're getting on. They're in late 40s, and they were on cliff tops. And he described where they were, and he said they parked in the car park at the RSPB. And he said he went through between. He said when they went onto the cliff tops, they took a right, which meant that the fence stopping people falling over the cliffs was on the left, and they're walking towards Flamborough. And he's describing this. He says, and we lit a pair of yellow eyes up, pinky yellow eyes, which is sort of instantly drew me to what me and Andy Ramsden saw. He said, and the dogs were with us. He says, and they wouldn't do anything. He says, it was strange. They wouldn't run about. They stuck with us. He says, and he also noted that the air felt off. He said, it felt electric. He said it was weird. He says the hairs on the back of my arms and on my neck were stuck up. He says we realised it felt strange. We realised it was surreally quiet. But obviously it's only looking back when you start analysing it that, you know. So he said, so he's not on his own, he's with someone else. He said, and we lit these big yellow eyes up. He says, but this thing didn't act like a rabbit would act, like stuck in the headlights. It just seemed to turn away. Said, so we carried on walking and lit these eyes up again, and it hadn't moved. Said, and then we came to a viewing platform, and bearing in mind this is in between 3 and 4 in the morning, and this guy's not familiar with the area. They're from Liverpool, but they get all over doing little bits of this wild camping stuff. Anyway, so, and he's not got an interest in any of this, David. I need to say this, that they weren't there for some paranormal experience or anything remotely related. I think they're probably just reliving old times when the things they've done in the years in military. But anyway, he says, we came to a viewing platform, he says, and then about, I don't know, 50 to 75 foot away, there were 2 gate posts without a gate on. Well, I can picture these gate posts now. The big 8x8 posts, and that's basically what they are. They've never had a gate on. He said, and we walked towards the gate posts. I mean, this guy will probably listen to this because I've been speaking to him today. And we put the torch on, he says, and hunkered down. And once again, please, listeners, and we're not trying to sell a Bringing Down the Light DVD here, but we'll be talking, but David, we'll be talking about this at the Awakening Conference, and we'll be playing the recording of what he's told me. So it's not just my words, because I've asked him and he's allowed me to record him. He says, this thing was hunkered down, and he swore, but I'll not swear. He says, at first I thought it was a huge hyena. He said it had like a hunched back, and all bristles on the back of its back, all bristling, the fur. He says, and then the next thing, it stood on 2 legs. He said, and this thing was 7 foot tall.
Wow. Mm.
Yeah, I'm only relaying a story. I've not seen anything 7 foot tall. He said it had a huge barrel chest on it, arms that were far too long for its body, even though it was long, and not over muscular, and hands. He says it didn't have paws, it had hands with claws. He says, and it took a step towards us. It had a head full of teeth, ears like a Alsatian type things at side of its head, and a silvery fawn chest. And he was terrified. The other guy, he just won't talk about it. This guy, you can feel the fear in his voice when he's talking about it. And I've never spoke to anybody that I'm really been terrified when they've seen these things. And anybody who's listened to any of the radio shows about the werewolves and the alleged dogman sightings, nobody comes away with feeling that it were a nice thing to see. Not from what I've seen. He says they backed away and went. Obviously, they're there to tell the story, which leads me to think that there's some other intelligence here. I mean, I don't even know if it's something that's playing with our minds, you know, David. As in projecting into our mind our worst nightmare, if that makes sense, because you would think an apex predator like that, it can't be living on Bempton, regardless of the amount of caves and sea tunnels that there are below those cliffs. It would have been seen. We know we're getting glimpses of this thing, but there's years between the glimpses. We're getting glimpses of this thing at Flixton, but there's years between. So I can't believe that we wouldn't be seeing the carnage that it would leave in its wake. I mean, I asked him how much he thought this thing would weigh, and he estimated it would weigh 300 pounds. Now, that would need to consume a lot of food. When it were a carnivore, and I mean, if it were omnivorous, it'd have to be grazing fields, and nobody's reported seeing anything like that. I mean, these are, listeners, these are really off-the-wall stories, and I'm not asking anybody to necessarily take my word for it, but look at these things with an open mind and ask yourself, you know, if these people continue to report this stuff, totally independent from one another, then we've got to have a grain of truth in it. And like I've said, just because science can't get its head round it, just because science says this can't exist and that can't possibly travel from that galaxy to here, well, they might not be travelling from that galaxy to Earth. They're already here.
Yeah, exactly the way I think of it. I think there are extraterrestrials that do visit us, but I think a lot of it could be right here in a different dimension plane, you know, on a different vibration plane, even if you like.
I would agree entirely. You know, I mean, we might just be one tweak away, and we're sat on Radio 1, and they're on Radio 2, and it could be as simple as that, just because we can't get our heads around it. I mean, the technology that some of these advanced, we'll call them beings, might have, it'd appear as magic to us. I mean, and it does appear like magic to us. I mean, you know, when we talked about the Hunumbi UFO landing, this is a case I'm looking into at the moment, David. And it's incredible to me. It's incredible. But I mean, these guys at one stage during their series of events that went on from 96, 97 and 98, well, one of the guys, Steve, claims that, he saw 3 huge black triangles travelling towards him from the coast. To describe Hunumbi, it's probably about 3 miles as the crow flies from the coast, although you can't see the sea because it's down in a bit of a dip. And it were 2 guys from a neighbouring industrial unit a few doors down, and they're watching these things and discussing them. And then at one point, Steve says they're going to fly right over top of us. And as he'd said those words, these things switched off. They didn't fly away. That his exact words, they just switched off. One moment they were there, one moment they weren't. Now, you'd have thought these monstrously huge triangles, there were no navigation lights on them, there were no sound to them, but you would have thought that other people would have observed them. But it were almost like there was some kind of intermind connection with Steve's voice saying these things are going to fly right over top of us, and an acknowledgement, and we're switching off. And some kind of, I don't know, cloaking ability. Is it almost like chameleon-like? I don't know. If so, why didn't they do it all the time? Or was that just designed for those guys? Was that because the following night, obviously, they had their UFO event. I mean, obviously, if we were going to talk about Hunumbi, we should have started 3/4 of an hour ago, to be honest, David.
I get that. I know what you mean. But yeah, I mean, what you're saying there, I do hear a lot of things that are very similar to that. That things, it seems like the mind can actually conjure these things up, or they seem to know what you're thinking. It's weird. I don't get it.
There's probably a bit of both in what you've just said there, David. You know, I mean, the mind can conjure them. You know, people who, I wouldn't say, I don't want this to be taken as a sweeping statement, but people who lean towards the structured nuts and bolts, you can sort of solid UFO, seem to see them.
Yeah.
Do you know? Yeah. And who's to say that they're not doing? Who's to say that this is not some kind of hive intelligence that can adapt and bend to whatever we want to perceive it as? I mean, it might be a bit of a wild thought, but you know, I'm beginning to think that all of this phenomena is, like we've said before, is somehow connected. And the fact that we get the cat sightings reported in the same place at a certain time of year, there might be gaps in it of years, but we're getting the cat sighting. What's special about that area? What's special about off Bempton where these lights are seen? I mean, another interesting one, while we're on with the sheep mutilations, for want of a better word, is that the cliffs there are 200 to 400 foot, you know, various places, and the sheer. How does a seal get on top of the cliffs? There was a seal on top of the cliffs, stripped of flesh. That's not something that an owl's going to pick up, is it?
No,
do you know what I mean?
Or even a giant eagle. I think they'd have a job picking a seal up.
We're looking at something that's 150 to 200 pound in weight. Yeah. Which it sort of beggars belief how it's possible, but that's what was on top of the cliffs. I mean, I find it incredible, and like I've said, nobody knows how it got there. Nobody knows what's been responsible for the deaths of these animals. But just because we don't know doesn't mean that we should. We can't categorise it. That's why there's been nothing in the papers and nothing, you know, in the local news about them. Because nobody's got a clue.
No, and all it does is just scares everybody, and I think, well, we've got no answer for it, but we're going to scare you anyway.
Yeah, well, you know,
and we can't do anything about it.
Well, just to answer the people that have said, oh, surely police would be involved, surely police know about it. Well, there you go. Yeah, they do. They're fully aware of it, but they've not got a clue what's doing it, I can assure you, and neither have I. All I know is that we're in this area where there's a lot of unexplained phenomena presenting. And that's another thing, David. You know, in the second book, there's a guy who's walked. A lot of things Cliff Lane seems to get mentioned a lot, and that's simply because that is your only route onto the cliffs for most people. So they have to travel up Cliff Lane. But there's a guy in the second book that's walked Cliff Lane, depending on it, he's retired now, but depending on his shifts, it would have been morning or night, for the best part of 25 years. And he's got 3 stories to tell. And he's done that walk every day for 25 years. And my point is, because people are coming up to Bempton and Flamborough, and rightly so, expecting or hoping to see some unexplained phenomena. And I like to tell them, I don't want to dampen people's spirits, but the chances are you won't. But then you sort of jump back with the sort of punchline that I have to say, but you are in an area where there's a higher probability than most areas to see something, because I can't think of anything that's not occurred up there. You know, there's been Men in Black sightings, there's missing time, and I spoke on Howard Hughes' show on December the 18th, 2017, Howard had received emails and texts from somebody who'd been walking with 2 friends at Bempton on the 14th of December. So it were ironic that I were on the show. Howard put me in touch with them as well afterwards. And they'd lost almost 2 hours of time whilst doing the walk where this guy claimed to have seen this upright dog creature this year on February the 7th. You know, same areas are throwing it up. I mean, and it's just bizarre. And I know you've got similar things happening at Rendlesham. So you've got, you know, Bempton's not unique, Flamborough's not unique. But they are highly unusual areas. I mean, I don't know what kind of phenomena you've got presenting at Rendlesham, but I should think everything at one time or another, has it?
Well, I've heard several stories about from giants to aliens to, you know, like greys and reptilians, and there's been all sorts, apart from the UFOs. I mean, I've been in the woods in the sort of night time, 2 o'clock in the morning, with Brenda Butler, who you probably know.
I know Brenda.
Yeah, and we've seen stars that actually start moving and then stop and move and stop. You know, there was about 4 or 5 of us one night sort of watching these stars moving and stopping. So what they were, I don't know. I've only ever seen one orb with my bare eyesight, like a red orb. Brenda saw it at the same time, and she said to me, "Did you see that?" And I said, "Yes, I did see that one." But normally, what I get is orb pictures with you know, a camera, and normally, if Brenda takes them, she gets better results than anybody else, which is the amazing thing. She's got some sort of a power that I think, what I call it, that she seemed to draw in some sort of beings to them. And talking about that, now...
And you're going to say Bill Rook, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've had Bill Rook up your way, haven't you?
He wants to come up. I've met Bill several times, and he's interesting, isn't he? He's a nice guy. He's full of enthusiasm. I'd like to see what happens when he comes up and uses his cameras, and just to see if anything does happen. Well, I'm not doubting Bill at all.
No,
I mean,
he's got some. I mean, he's shown me. I don't know if he's shown you pictures and things, but he's shown me some amazing photographs that where his hand glows and everything like that. And he's got his book coming out himself. I think hopefully towards the end of this year. So I'm hoping to get Bill on the show at some point around about that time when his book comes out. So. But obviously, we'll probably be seeing him a couple of times this year anyway, at a couple of conferences, won't we?
I believe he's coming to Chris Evers, which I'll be speaking at on the 17th of August. I think it's August, innit? Forgive me, Chris, if I've got date wrong.
I think it's around about that time, yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got your own conference.
Yeah, you're coming. Are you going to come to that, Paul? I hope.
Yes, I want to. Yeah, but that would be good.
Well, we better tell everyone out there. It's the Colonel Holt Returns to Woodbridge conference in Suffolk. It's on September the 8th. If anyone would like tickets, contact me. There's a few. There's a few left, but they are going sort of steadily. And we've got a little bit of time left before that. But
well, I have to say, David, you know. Praise to Colonel Holt, to be honest with you, and this isn't me sucking up if people think it is, but anybody that got to listen to him at Chris Evers's conference last year, or if you didn't get to listen to him, then you need to get to David's, because I'd seen him previously, when John did the conference. I don't know what year it was.
It was in Woodbridge in 2015 when it all kicked off. wasn't
Yeah.
it? But things are very. This is why the conference is called Colonel Holt Returns to Woodbridge, because it's kind of a different thing now. It's kind of everything's settled down, and I think what he was saying has been proven to be true and everything like that. So, but a lot of new information has come to light since he's written his first book. I mean, I don't really want to talk too much about Colonel Holt because this is your show, but
well, no, I don't mind. I mean, it's not all about me. And just briefly to stay on Holt, I was amazed how sharp and on point that guy was.
I mean, I like him a lot. You know, he's a lovely man. And he can't remember everything that happens 40 years ago now, but he does try to give his own true rendition of what he believes happened. You know, he doesn't come out with aliens landed at Cape Green and all this rubbish. You know, because
it is difficult though. You know, David. I mean, to get it right all the time. I mean, I had a spell last year where I was talking on radio shows pretty much every week, and I've turned some brilliant shows down just recently, including Coast to Coast again. But I will go back on for him. I mean, that's not a snub. I've just had too much on. But it is difficult. I found myself talking about Hunmanby on James Bartley's show, and I said that Steve stood with the other two witnesses, Dave and Andrew, watching the triangles. And when I listened to it back, I realised, I thought, what am I talking about? He didn't stand with Dave and Andrew. He was stood with two of the operatives from a unit further down. But so it is easy to get your story wrong, shall we say, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're lying. I mean, because once again, these guys have let me. I always, if possible, I ask them, I say, "Can I record you?" Mainly because it helps when you're writing about the stories. So the Hunmanby story is entirely accurate. I mean, the things that were happening. But once again, just to stay with Hunmanby, in 1996, it started in June, and they thought it was poltergeist activity. There were bits of wood flying around in the workshop. There were steel washers hitting the side of the workshop. The light bulbs would blow, and the radio and the power would cut, yet the radio carried on playing that was plugged into the mains, and it blew all the circuits, yet then they'd unplug it and it carried on playing. They attributed everything to poltergeist activity because they'd found a grave. When they were clearing the land, they found a wooden grave dated from the 1800s. So these guys, they found a box. Pardon me for saying a box. I don't mean it to associate with a grave, but they found a box to fit the phenomena in. But then it all changed because it went from June, July, and August of '96, and then it stopped. June, July, and August of '97, and June, July, and August of '98, and then it all changed after they saw the triangles because a few nights later, they all had a classic flying saucer sighting that was landed in the bottom of the compound at Hunmanby. Interviewed all three men separately. They've not associated with each other for one of them for about 10 years and the other for about 7. One of them didn't even want to talk about it. It were only that I dragged the story out of one guy and he put me in touch with the other. And they're all singing from the same sheet. They saw beings, with people want to call them aliens, then let's term them aliens, but I don't know where they were from. The military presence. It's an incredible story. And I'm reaching out to anybody who might remember any military roadblocks around 1998 at Hunmanby, Bridlington, because we've already got a roadblock in Hornsey, which is a few miles away, where a triangle was seen flying low over some fields by a retired Coast Guard. And I think I wrote about that in the first book, way before I knew about this story. And that's from 1998. And we've got roadblocks in Hunmanby the night that the flying saucer landed in the bottom of the compound. And that's exactly what Andrew says. He says it was a classic flying saucer. He says, I can't believe it. He says, I think it was staged. He still does to this day. He says there were like a glass bubble in top and I could see this little thing inside it. He said, and I stood looking. He says, there's all mist around it and lights. He said, and I saw Steve walking down towards it. And then he didn't see him get taken. He says, but next thing he's not there. He said, and then I walked to the front of the unit. He said, and I opened the side door and 2 military men dragged me inside, threatened me, told me to stay where I was, and all three guys are telling a similar story. But interestingly, they were all working together, David, in the unit, but they don't remember being with each other during that period of time.
Right.
Obviously, I'm touching on bits of a story that probably sound a bit disjointed to anyone listening, and maybe we can do Hummonby start to finish at some point, David.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd love to have you back on sometime. These military men, were they actually in uniform, or were they like high-ranking officers?
They were in black, completely dressed in black, head to toe. And somebody sent me some information recently. And I thank him. They call him Philip. I'll not say his surname. Oh, it's not Philip Mantle, by the way.
Kinsella.
No, not Philip Kinsella, no, and he sent me some information regarding something that the late Tony Dodd wrote about with these military guys who were in black, a special unit that were in black head to toe around the same time. And, excuse me, just to carry on with Hummonby, these guys worked on a night, this was a second job, and they worked from about 5 o'clock to anything to 3 in the morning for 3 years, working on high-end vehicles, and they used to sign write vehicles and do fairground rides, and sometimes on a weekend they'd stay the night there. And Dave's, I briefly fit this in, Dave's mum and dad used to visit him, because he was youngest of the guys working there, and they'd come every night and just have a natter with him and fetch him a few sandwiches. And on the way home, the night that the flying saucer was seen, and I'm going to call it a flying saucer because that's what these witnesses claim it looked like, they'd left at 10 o'clock, and they never come back, they left. But after the events, after everything had happened, because the 3 men all got dragged back into this workshop, and the workshop's huge, by the way, you could drive double-decker buses into it, and they all got dragged in by men dressed in black, armed, and threatened, and Dave was dropped to the floor and pinned down and threatened and not to move. But after everything had happened, after everyone had gone away, or everything had gone quiet and settled, Dave's mum and dad came back. His mum were crying, his dad were very frightened, and when they drove home that night, they'd been stopped by a military roadblock. Be it a small one, but they'd been stopped, taken out of their car, and sat in the back of a black van, where they were armed. We'll call them soldiers, but they're not soldiers in terms that we're looking at. I mean, there must be some special unit, everything were black. And they were threatened, and they were told that they knew where they lived, they knew what cars they drove. Obviously, they knew what car they were driving that night. They knew everything, basically, about them. Then they released them, and they went back and told the son, and they told Steve, and they told Andrew, because all this stuff had already happened. They were warned not to speak about it. They're still alive. They won't speak about it. And Dave's asked his mum if she'll talk to me, but there's no way she's going to talk to me. But the other 3 I've got lots more to get. I would say it sounds a bit, it doesn't sound right saying get out of them. I've lots more information to try and glean yet, but I'm really keen to see, somebody must have experienced these roadblocks. You know, I don't have to validate their story, because I've been back to the Hummonby industrial estate, and it's still small by industrial estate standards today, even 20 odd years on. And the bus breakers yard is still a few doors down from where it took place, and some of those guys are still working there, and they've backed them up. They've backed their story up from 20 odd years ago, from 1998. I don't mean it's true because they've backed it up, but I mean, they've not seen these guys for years and years, and I've just done a bit of door knocking. I've been to the actual unit where the event took place, just to see if any other paranormal activity has ever taken place in that building, because as I previously told you, David, we've got these steel washers flying about, light bulbs, and there were money materialising out of thin air, and pebbles dropping in front of them, all sorts of things. They were coming out to the vehicles on a night. This is in June, July and August of the 3-year period. There'd be huge animal prints on the boots and on the roof and on the bonnets. Literally huge, but no dents. No damage to the cars. The stuff that were happening, and this is why I was saying, David, I think we've got to, it's like a paranormal soup. I think we've got to encompass it all, and not stick our heads in one box and say I'm a UFO researcher, so I don't want to talk to anybody who's interested in cryptids. Let's start looking and throwing net a little bit wider and think, me personally anyway, I can't speak for other people, but let's start encompassing it all. That's my look.
I fully agree with you, Paul. I mean, I really, really do agree with you. I mean, if you listen to a few of the other shows, we have actually covered things like that on a few of them. Adele Casella's Rocha I had on a few shows back, and she was telling stories about people that go missing and, you know, pretty scary stories. But
do you know, and David, we've not even touched on, but that's the thing. These areas, they actually take in and throw out everything. We've got missing people at Bempton. And believe me, I have been as respectful as I can be, because obviously it's somebody's loved one. I've not talked about them in any derogatory terms. I've not lumped them in saying that I think they've been taken by aliens, because quite honestly I don't know. You know, I mean, there's some people would want to sensationalise it and add them aspects in. Just because these are books about unexplained phenomena don't mean we've got to lower tone and somehow disrespect somebody's loved one. Yeah. But basically, you know, we've got people who've gone to those cliff tops to look at the seabirds, such as a guy called Nigel Simon Hodgson. I'm not sure of the date now. I think it was 2014. He went all over the place looking at the wildlife and parking up, and a little bit eccentric, but other than that's what he did. Parked at Bempton RSPB, never been seen again. Just never been seen again. And a guy called Edward Machin, he wanted to go look at the seabirds. He got a train to Bridlington, not obviously, but it broke down in Scarborough. A taxi dropped him off on Cliff Lane because he was seen on CCTV. And I've spoke to a guy whose CCTV it is, and all that's been confirmed. It were in papers anyhow, but I've done that, and walked up Cliff Lane to the RSPB, never been seen again. 7 days later, 16 miles up the coast, a guy called Nigel Savage is with his dogs, 2 spaniel dogs, and he's gone to do a bit of fishing. Never been seen again.
Wow.
But that's just the tip of it.
It's so scary, isn't it, when you think about it? That's,
you know, it really is scary. You know, I mean, and these people. I mean, from 2004, a guy called. Good God, can't think of his name now. I'm sorry, listeners, but he parked up to do a day's walking. Never been seen again. In between that, there are people that have had, let's say, challenges in their lives, and they've probably had relationships that have broken down, and they've left a note and said they're going to end their life. And,
oh yeah, sure. And then you'd find the bodies, wouldn't you?
And usually you do, yeah. Usually they end up further down coast, or they're on the rocks. And I'm sorry to make it sound like that, but that's what happens. But what I'm saying is they're not. I don't mean they are just as important, these people, but they're not what I will write about. I'm only wanting to write about the people that seemed fairly well adjusted, that, for want of a better word, have just vanished. I mean, I contacted the Missing Persons Bureau. Because it looks like a checkerboard of missing people. And I said, you know, and you've got these names, the names I've just mentioned, but there's about 9 to 11 of them on this board, on a board with probably 30 on, I don't know. And I've said, you've got this person who's gone missing and he lives in Hull. You've got this one in York. You've got this one who lived in Rickle. You've got this one, another one who lived in York. Yes. I said, but don't you realise they've all gone missing in Bempton? Yeah, and we don't correlate that. We don't. I said, well, you should be. And I've told police exactly the same. They're missing a massive trick. There's something happening here, and probably the reason, I don't know, because they can't get their head around what is happening. I mean, it's the famous, not the famous, but the usual thing in the newspaper article is from some wife or husband is, why has my husband vanished off the face of the earth? And you see, and that's basically what they appear to have done. These people that no intention of disappearing, and they've just gone. It's very sad.
Well, we've got all these families left without any answers.
They've left with no answers, and the places that I'm looking don't help these people as well, because I'm looking at alternative things that most people, I wouldn't say rational-minded people, because your listeners will be rational-minded, or I would like to think a lot of them are, but they're not into this subject, and they wouldn't consider that anything otherworldly could be responsible. I mean, and until we know that it is, I'm not going to hold my hand up and say is either. All I'm saying is they are disappearing, and they're disappearing in an area where these strange things happen.
Yeah. Do you ever get any negative responses, Paul?
I probably will now.
No, seriously. I mean, do you ever get people sort of saying, "Oh, go away, stay away from me," or something, anything like
that? I haven't done. I've had people they roll their eyes and think you're cuckoo. I mean, it's amazing, because some of these farmers are the funniest. I noted that after the big cat had been seen on social media, he'd put a picture of his house cat and put a toy tractor at the side of it, and just trying to generate a laugh at somebody else's expense. But it doesn't detract from the fact that it wasn't me, it weren't Paul Sinclair reporting seeing this big black cat. It was about 8 independent witnesses.
Yeah, sure, you were just asking the questions, weren't you?
Yeah. So, but that's the nature of the game, and I wouldn't say you've got to be thick-skinned, but you've just got to, and what's interesting as well is that the guy that actually put the picture of the cat, I've actually spoke to his son and got a UFO report off him years before, that landed on the road as he's travelling on what's called Short Lane between Bempton and Bridlington in the early hours of the morning. I didn't put that on social media and as some kind of insult, and there's another little bit to it as well, that the actual farmer who were ridiculing actually had a UFO sighting with his ex-wife, because she's told me. She made a point of contacting me and telling me, and so these people really, it's not all of them, but some of them are hypocrites. I mean, but you can't please everybody, David, and I think providing you're respectful about what you're looking into, be the missing people, where it's got to be delicate, or somebody who claims to have seen a UFO or had some terrifying experience with something on the cliff tops. Providing you go into it with an open mind and try and judge the person, then I think they're all worth speaking to.
Yeah, I mean, knowing you as I do, I'm sure you approach with a gentlemanly conduct, and you don't go in like a raging bull. When I know you for a fact that you wouldn't do anything like that, and you'll be sensitive to their feelings as well.
You're just breaking up a bit there.
Oh, am I? All right. I was just saying. I could hear myself all right. I was just saying that I know you, but knowing you as I do, you'd be very sensitive to their feelings, and you're a gentleman, so you'd approach them in a sensible fashion anyway, wouldn't you? Hello?
I think that's the only way to... hello, David. I'm not you can hear me. I think that's the only way we can be. I mean, I know there's big egos within this subject, but that's the same in anything. But is it the same in anything?
It's usually where there's money involved, Paul.
Well, yeah, but once again, that's same with everything, isn't it? I mean, but I hope I like to think I treat everybody the same, and that's how I want to stay, and I really don't want to be any different than that. I'm not looking for sort of fame or stardom. I just want to be me. I quite enjoy I really enjoy doing the research. I love it. It's a thrill. I mean, this coming week, cryptid researcher who you really ought to seek out is Colin Keelty, and we'll be doing some really early morning.
Put you on to me, will you? And I'll make a date with him.
Yeah, I will do. Yeah, he spoke on Vic Cundiff's Dogman Radio, and I don't know if anybody's ever listened to Vic's shows, but they're really good. I mean, you've got witnesses there from all over the world reporting things like what people are seeing at Flixton. And just to briefly jump back to these cryptids, you usually find that the people who've seen them, you find out second hand. You don't find out off the person. They're not raving that they've seen this thing in most instances. Then you have to go tread gently and see whether you can get the story out of them. So they're not most of the time they're not volunteering these things up. The guy who claimed to have seen this creature on February the 7th of this year, he put those comments on, and anybody who wants to go onto Bempton Phenomena, you'll find them, because I think we've...
Hello? 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 I think I might have lost Paul.
Something that he didn't think could exist. And, and isn't that the case with everything? Hello?
Hello, yeah, I think I lost you for a moment then.
I was talking, but I don't know whether that's been picked.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It might have recorded all right, so we'll just carry on.
Can you hear me, David?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Right. I think we've got a communication problem. Can you hear me, Paul?
I can now, yeah. So I
don't know. This Skype dropped out, I think.
I just think we've got to just approach all. Everything's going a bit wrong here with this recording, you know, David. It's broken.
Yeah.
I can't hear you.
You can't. Well, I can hear you, okay, Paul.
Okay. Well, you know, throughout.
What I'll have to do is try and cut these bad bits out at the end of it.
Okay. Yeah, I've got you. You know, because I'm thinking we're live. I apologise, yeah.
Yeah, no, we're all right.
You know, throughout 2019, throughout 2017, for some reason, the American military were up on the cliff tops. And obviously, as I've previously said, I didn't find out about the animal killings, the animal deaths, until New Year's Day 2018. But it had been going on all throughout that year. And we'd got these Dodge Ram pickups with this big green unit on the back with the dish and a big generator. And they were on the cliff tops. They were around the area where all these things have been seen, roughly where the animals have been mutilated, where the porpoise were being found. And obviously you can't link A to B, but you start to think to yourself, you know, there's probably some connection. Are they showing an interest in this? I don't think they're responsible for it. You know, social media at the same time were also reporting a hum. A very, very subtle humming sound, and people on social media were reporting hearing it all around Bridlington and East Yorkshire. I'd heard it myself, and I think it were coming from the generator of this military unit that were up on the cliff tops. Now, I don't know what it was doing, and we've got to understand that we're in an unstable world, and it could be nothing to do with this paranormal aspect that we're looking at, but nevertheless, it is interesting. And interestingly enough, the military vehicles were seen again, I think it was 2 weeks ago. And Steve Ashbridge told me he'd got a bit of, I think it was some pictures of them, and Andy Ramsden had seen them as well. I've not seen them.
Anyway, I think what with our communication problems, Paul, I think we better leave it there because I've got a little bit of chopping around to do.
Okay, David.
I certainly would like to get you back on again, perhaps in a few months. We've got these conferences coming up. I think the Awakening conference where you'll be doing a presentation. This will probably go out after that. So, but people will hear it anyway because it's going to be on podcast and YouTube and everything. But if anyone wants to actually come and see you, you'll be appearing at the Pontefract Outer Limits.
Yeah, I'll be appearing at the Outer Limits conference on August the 17th, I believe.
I'll be seeing you there, but I'll be seeing you at the Awakening as well next week. So I'll be seeing you 3 times this week. You're lucky.
It's been going to be wonderful. And I don't think I'll be seeing Chris Evers at the Awakening because I know he wanted a lift, but with the people who've appeared in the documentary for us, such as David Hind and Andy Ramsden and Bob, they've got tickets, and we're just limited with roaming card, you know.
Ah, right, yeah.
But I haven't actually spoken to Chris for a while. I'll have to get in touch with him and see what he's up to. But I think we're all ready. I don't know what the setup is for talking at this.
Yeah. I think he's been quite involved with Philip Mantle and the alien autopsy.
I read the comments. Yeah, I sort of amused me.
It's been hilarious.
Yeah. It's good, isn't it? But you know, I mean, what you find you do, David. I mean, I don't know about you, but you find it consumes you if you get too involved in it.
Yeah, you know very well how something's consumed me for the last 3 or so years.
Yeah, but you have that. I don't mean away from it, but you've cut it back now.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
You know, you must be better for your health as well.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I mean, since I've been doing this show, it's helped me quite a bit because I'm able to speak to people, not sort of making anything out of it or anything, but it's actually, it's been nice, you know, because there's a lot of nice people out there, and there's only a few rotten ones that you come across, and most people are nice, and you know, there's just a few bad eggs in the basket that really need sorting out, you know.
Well, I think you've been on that case, haven't you? So you're, whatever you're doing. Keep doing.
Yeah, trying. Well, I mean, I think things are coming to a head now and finishing, so let's just hope so anyway. But anyway, Paul, it's been great. Excuse me. It's been great talking to you. Excuse me, listeners. I've had a bit of a sore throat this last week or so excuse me coughing. Anyway, I'm going to have to say goodbye, Paul. We've got a bit of communication problems here. I'm going to have to sort out. But
No problem.
anyway, listeners, you've been listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network and Paranormal Dimensions. I'm David Young. You've been listening to Paul Sinclair, and we're going to say goodbye. And thank you, Paul, and come back again, please.
Thank you very much, David. It's been a pleasure.
I'll see you soon. All right, take care of yourself, Paul, and thanks for coming on. Cheers. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Colonel Charles Holt is returning to Woodbridge on the 8th of September 2019. It's a Sunday. Tickets are £20 for an all-day UFO event with other great speakers. If you'd like tickets, please get in touch with me. This is my email address. It's davidyoung2qn@yahoo.co.uk. It's going to be a great event, and there's a few tickets left, but they are going quickly, so you need to act fast. Thank you. Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.